Gentlemen.
Jennifer, never before. Oh my gosh.
Ms. Wadia, the floor is all yours.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our personnel meeting for the month of November. Hopefully, if you have any questions, if you could please place them in the chat for anyone that has joined us.
Q&A, Ms.
And
Wadia.
I'm
Q&A.
going to turn it over to Q&A. Thank you. Okay, so if you could type your questions in the Q&A, my apologies. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. B. Coates. Would you like to begin?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
We do have a presentation this evening, so if we could bring that up. There are two items that we have on the agenda for the Personnel Committee meeting this evening. Our first item is recruitment and hiring procedures, administrative staff. Mr. Denenza, we don't see the screen. We just see that you started sharing, but nothing comes up. I can be your backup if I need to be.
Anything now?
No, sir. Just give me permission to share and I'll share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, do you guys see the,
Yes.
okay. All right, so we have two items, the recruitment and hiring procedures for administrative staff, and then the superintendent evaluation process. So, and I think it was September, we did provide to the board some information as it related to, or relates to our procedures for recruitment and hiring. And what I want to do, or what we want to do tonight, Joe and I will actually bring up the current procedures as the administration has drafted. And what you will find is that in certain sections, there are highlighted areas which some members of the board did provide feedback. So what I'm thinking is that we would go through each page, and if there are additional concerns or comments, we could address them and then modify the, we will make the necessary modifications where noted. Does that work for everyone? Just thumbs up? Okay, all right. So again, this is a draft version. The administration's thinking is because these are procedures, they support a current policy. So these will be the procedures that we will utilize as it relates to the hiring of administrative staff. All right, and I think that will take care of the first highlighted item on the cover. And if there's a comment or if someone thinks differently, please just unmute yourself and chime in. All right, on page 1, we really speak to the overall process for the hiring for administrative staff. We outline the procedures that we would have in the district. We specify what would be included within the job description, if you will. And then we go into the actual process itself. So the advertising of the position open, of the open position. And so here you'll see that we'll have an internal as well as an external announcement. And I think the thinking here was that, or the suggestion here, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit because it carries over to page 3. The comment was that, and I think the PC represents personnel committee comment, we think we need to be intentional here and say professional publications that are, go ahead.
Person of color centric.
Okay, so up here, the PC, doesn't that PC is person of color?
That's
Oh,
personnel
that was
committee.
personnel committee.
That's what I thought. That's what I said.
Oh,
PC
sorry.
is-
I'm
no,
sorry. Sorry,
PC
I was
up here
further
is
down.
personnel committee. We think we need to be intentional and here and say professional publications that are people of color centric.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry
Thank
about
you.
that.
Thank you. And so you referenced here a site where we could actually post external announcements. So that was the suggestion here. We will make that modification. So we go on to talk also about in this section how we sometimes acquire individuals' names. And so we do suggest that we take into account referrals. And so referrals could come from any administrator or anyone within the district. And we would want to specify that those referrals would still need to apply through the online portal process that we have. So that's what the Personnel Committee was highlighting here, is that applicants still need to apply through our online mechanism, correct? And the answer is yes. So we will definitely specify that in item 4. Then we go into the formal application packet, the items that we will be requiring. We highlight some items that will be included for administrative positions that may require the Pennsylvania certification. One of the things I am going to suggest, because I know everyone does not memorize the acts, meaning Act 34, Act 114, Act 151, Act 168. I'm not sure everybody really knows what they mean. So one of the notes that I've made is that we're going to just put the name of the act behind the number, and we can reference it later, but at least individuals will know what that specifies. So Joe, if you can just make sure that we get that change as well. I've made a note on my copy, but that's one of the things that I had highlighted. Are we still good so far? We're on page 3, getting ready to go to page 4. All right.
Mhm.
Page 4 talks about for non-certified administrative positions. The Personnel Committee was recommending that we identify what those positions are, and we can definitely do that. I believe we can specify that here, and so we'll do that at the top of page 4. Also here, we reference some other acts. I think they were in the previous section, so because they've been identified previously, that would also follow onto page 4, page 4 of 9.
Mhm.
All right, I'm moving down, still in this same section. We are now moving to, or we're still in the section for formal application packet. Number 4, all applicants will receive an email from the Office of Human Resources acknowledging receipt of the application packet. The recommendation is to include correspondence with all applicants after the position has been filled in the form of a thank you letter / email. Definitely agree with that, because we do want to thank individuals for their time and interest. Item 5 speaks to no candidate will be interviewed or will be considered for an interview if their paperwork has not come through the Human Resources Office by the date of the published deadline. Just a minor item here to remove the double period. I've also made a suggestion here for Human Resources Office. My thought here is that would read has not come through the district's online application portal. I just want to make sure that we're very specific, because I know some people will say, well, I sent it to Human Resources, but that's not the same as submitting an application. I think it should go through the online portal. Any disagreements there?
Nope.
All right, I don't see any. Then we have retention of the application packet, what we will do there, and then the initial application screening of professional applications, still on page 4 of 9. All right, we're going to move on to page 5 of 9, where we specify or spell out some of the items that would be included. We are going to follow these recommendations for items C and D and remove grade point averages, because at this point we are talking about professionals. And so that's something that we would delete in item C and item D on page 5 of 9. Excuse me. Then we go into the actual interview process itself, where Human Resources would contact the applicants, inform them of the interview date, location, and time, speak to the interview process and the interview committee. Where applicable, the superintendent would be a part of that process. We also talk about the interview committee, in which they are assessing an applicant's skills, and then they would go through the questions. The interview committee would also allow the applicant a chance to ask questions as well. And the interview team or committee will look for characteristics of the applicant that meet the job description as posted. So when we speak to these items here, A through D, we just need to be grammatically correct. So we need to put some question marks in there and we will take care of that. And that's at the top of page 6 of 9. All interviews will be conducted in a business-like format. Then we go to highlight interviews. So typically there's a first interview and then we speak to who would participate in the first interview. If it is for an administrative position, and then there are different types of positions. So it could be a building principal, central office administrator, etc. All right. The hiring administrator of the vacant position, as well as the director of human resources. Those individuals will work together to develop interview questions as well as evaluation criteria.
Sorry.
That's all right. There will be situational questions that will be provided for the candidate that they would need to answer. Character questions basically are to identify a individual's traits, motivation, goals, etc. And then there will be questions related to technical skills as well. In most instances, there will be a second interview. So we talk about that process. And then we highlight whether or not a teacher, parent, or student input if there is a second round. And so we have some modifications here that need to be made. Overall, we would also like this teacher/parent/student second round implemented for professional staff hiring too. And I just have a question here for this. When we say professional staff, are we talking about administrative staff within the central office? If we can just get clarification, because I know we've typically not included parents and students. So I just want to, or was that more school-based?
Ms. Wadia?
I believe when we had the discussion, it was more or less to try and keep them involved in all of the positions. That way we can continue the process of making everyone feel inclusive in the school district. So, allowing them similar to a board member serving on the committee, just so they could be an ear and have any posing questions for any position.
Okay, I just want us to be mindful that with students, most of our interviews are during the school day. So I'm sorry?
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
Oh, so that means that we would be saying to pull a student technically or possibly out of school, out of instructional time to be a part of an interview process.
And I think in that process, even if it was allowing them to maybe pose a question where someone else could ask for them. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, just to make sure that the students felt like they were a part of the process. If they could
Or review resumes without names on them for feedback. Any way to make sure that our full school community was engaged in hiring.
Okay, we'll flesh that out a little bit more just to make sure we're clear.
Okay.
All right, thank you all. I appreciate providing that clarity. Are there any other questions or comments on that item? All right. Then we highlight superintendent interview, what basically happens here. I think one of the highlights was that the personnel committee, we really like this. Seems very fair. Explanation and rubric should be provided to the personnel committee in terms of the superintendent reserving the right to decline a candidate after the final interview and to direct the interview committee to reopen the search. And so for clarification on this one, the individuals a part of the interview process would have the rubric. So are we saying that when we bring the person to the executive committee that we would bring the rubric there? I just want to make sure that we're clear on what the recommendation is here from the personnel committee.
I believe when we had that discussion, it was kind of if a candidate is declined and we have to reopen it, just to get feedback from the superintendent as to what are we looking for. So I don't know if it will be adjusting questions, but just to have feedback so we know maybe some things that might have been missed. So it would just be helpful to have that feedback after a candidate was declined, so we would know what to look for potentially in the next candidate.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Also, what you didn't like about the final candidate, and just the feedback loop.
Got it. Okay, that's fair. All right, we're going to go on to page 8 of 9, where we highlight the Board of School Directors. Typically, we have the board members a part of the Act 93 applicants or interview process. And so I think the recommendation was that we would indicate Act 93 candidates and then list them, and that's fine. And then, as we've been doing this year, the Personnel Committee, members of that group would be a part of the interview process as time permits, or if they wanted to be a part of that. And here it says not more than 3. All right, so we will make those modifications. It goes on to here to speak to school board members being a part of the interview team, and that the Personnel Committee would see the rubric used and with explanations of the final identified candidate. And this would take place before appearing on the agenda. And this is where I added, since this was written up, we've started having personnel executive committees. And so my thought is that's where this individual information could be brought to that personnel executive committee, if that's agreed with everyone.
I agree.
That would make sense to bring it there, and then everybody would be in the loop. Okay, I see thumbs up. All right. And then the last recommendation, I believe, is on page 8 of 9. Adding some clarity here. And Joe, you may need to chime in here. This is checking references and what to do when checking references. Item B says, in no case will the person recommending hire serve as a reference. And the Personnel Committee was just asking for some clarity.
I think if I refer a candidate, I'm also on the committee, my reference would be seen as neutral. I would need to go outside of my reference to get 3 other references besides, so that we're, it's not seen as a favoritism or an inside person. So, because we do sometimes have people that recommend people, and then they're part of the committee, but their reference would be discounted, if you will. We would use other references outside of that person.
Board members, you have comments in reference to that?
No, it's fair.
I agree.
Okay. Do you think it's clear the way that's worded, or do we need to work on some wording there?
I think it's very clear cut.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
I could tweak it a little bit. I think, yeah, it's still, yeah.
All right. Any other questions from board members on that item on page 8 of 9? All right, page 9 of 9, we have credential check. And I think the recommendation here in item 2 speaks to, in the event that 3 clearances cannot be obtained. And one of the thoughts I had was that we should spell out what we're referencing here, where we say 3 clearances. What are they? So maybe in parentheses behind clearances, we would actually list what the 3 clearances are. And again, given the pandemic, there's some clearances that you may not be able to get, i.e. fingerprinting, et cetera, if the place or the establishment is not open. So we could definitely put a note in there for that particular instance. And I think that includes all of the comments that we had for the administrative staff procedures for recruitment and hiring. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute just to see if anyone has any questions or comments in reference to that item before we go to the next item on our agenda.
no comments other than a huge thank you for doing that document and making it a priority so early in your leadership to make that crystal clear to everyone.
Well, I want to thank Joe also because, he did a lot of the legwork, and we wanted to make sure that we had a process and procedure. And I believe our the next personnel committee meeting, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, we will do what?
We'll do the professional staff, the teaching staff
Okay.
process on the 15th of December is the next personnel.
Okay. And then we have one more group to do, correct?
Correct. That would be for a generic term of support staff, recruiting and hiring. We had three separate groups that I worked through with policies. So the administrative, professional staff / teachers, and then support staff.
Okay. So that will be our process for the next two meetings, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. All right. All right. So I'm going to take us back to the presentation, and then we will go to our next item. So hopefully you guys see the screen here. And so the next item is the superintendent's evaluation. Ms. Ivory, do you want me just to walk through this and what's been done, or do you want to start?
If you would like to start, and then we can jump in.
Okay. Earlier in the year, we had an opportunity to meet, and there was a discussion around the superintendent's evaluation model. And there are basically two models, one by the Pennsylvania School Boards Association and one model that's developed by the Pennsylvania Association of School Administrators. Overall, there are similarities within each model. There are various characteristics that are, I'll just say, highlighted, if you will. And so in each one of these instruments, some of the items that are referenced or highlighted, if you will, speak to student growth and achievement, organizational leadership, district operations and financial management, communication and community relations, human resource management, professionalism. And so when you look at these, you'll find that within the two documents, there are similarities. And so for the Pennsylvania Association of School Administrators, some of the areas here within this document that are referenced speak to these standards. So you have shared vision, culture of learning, decision-making, management, family and community, ethics, advocacy, personal and professional growth, and then you have objective performance standards as well. So after looking at both of these instruments, the board did request for me to indicate which tool I would recommend. And after looking at both of them, my recommendation was that we would utilize the passive superintendent evaluation model. And then from that process, Ms. Ivory and Ms. Hopkins then outlined a process that will be followed. So Ms. Ivory, I'll pause there. And then if you want me to go to the next slide for the process and timeline, I can bring that up.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, so as you can see, Ms. Hopkins and we've been going through the process of trying to give time frame as to when everything should take place to have everything completed by 2021, July of 2021. So phase one, we've solicited feedback from the board members, the school directors. In phase two, we requested a self-evaluation from Dr. B. Coates, and we received that on October 28th. And for phase three, prepare a blank evaluation, and we received that on October 28th, 2020. So right now we are going through the process of compiling all of the documents to make sure we have everything in place. And then we are continuing to go through the next phase. So in phase four, we're going to prepare, we've actually completed a timeline. So that way everyone will know when things should be completed. So the initial discussion was held at today, this November 17th Personnel Committee meeting. We've obtained a job description for Dr. B. Coates, his contract currently for November 18th. So we have obtained those copies. We are going to hold several committee meetings to discuss the evaluation and the procedure, the rubric, the outcomes, etc. That date will be to be determined. We're going to submit the evaluation to the entire school board for review by May 18th of 2021. The board of school directors will have time to return their evaluations back to us June 1st, 2021. And then we will submit the evaluation to the board and put it on the district website by July 1st of 2021. Are there any questions?
Thank you for your work.
You're welcome.
Okay. So Ms. Ivory, I think those were our, those were our 2 items for tonight. You're muted, Ms. Ivory. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I muted myself. Thank you, Dr. B. Coach, for that information. That was helpful. Thank you for supporting me with this first process with putting together a meeting. Does anyone have any questions? Do we have
I
anything
don't
in
have
the
any
Q&A?
question, but I do have a comment. I want to say that you guys did a lot of work here with both the hiring process as well as the superintendent evaluation timeline. I think that's a lot of work put into this and a lot of thought. So I want to say great job to the team.
I concur.
Ditto.
Ms. Hopkins, did you want to say anything? I just realized you were on the call.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thank you again. Thank you, everyone. Our next personnel meeting will be held, I believe it's the 15th of December on
Yes.
Tuesday.
Yes.
Yes.
Our normal meetings will be held on the Thursday, but because of the holiday for November and December, we're gonna hold the meetings on Tuesday. But again, please be on the lookout for the change. Once we start the new year, they will resume on Thursday. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Are there any other questions, concerns? Have a
Nope.
great day. Enjoy your holiday, everyone. Be safe and take care. Thanks
All right.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.